First Contact's Price. The Galactic Federation's Emergency Council chamber hadn't seen this level of activity in over 3 centuries. Representatives from 17 spacefaring civilizations gathered in the vast crystalline hall, their attention fixed on the holographic display at the chamber center. It showed a small blue planet, unremarkable except for the flashing red warning indicators surrounding it. High Counselor Vexterra of the Arxosian Empire leaned forward, her iridescent scales reflecting the emergency lights. So these, humans, they claim to have a solution to the Nexus Plague. The same plague that has confounded our best minds for millennia. Not exactly, High Counselor, replied Dr. Zinma, the Federation's chief xenobiologist. His tentacles twisted nervously as he manipulated the holographic controls. They claim they can't cure it. Instead, they propose something far more radical. They want to change the fundamental nature of organic life itself. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The Nexus Plague had been the Federation's greatest challenge since its founding. It didn't just kill, it rewrote genetic code, turning victims into biological time bombs that spread the infection exponentially. 3 civilizations had already fallen to it, their entire populations transformed into mindless carriers. Preposterous, declared Ambassador Cthul of the Silicon Collective, his crystalline form vibrating with skepticism. These humans achieved faster than light travel barely 50 years ago. They're practically children playing with technology they barely understand. Dr. Zinma projected a new image, a complex molecular diagram that shifted and transformed in impossible ways. Perhaps that's precisely why they propose something we'd never consider. They've developed a process they call controlled evolutionary acceleration. Instead of fighting the plague, they want to help life evolve beyond its reach. The chamber erupted in chaos. Several representatives immediately demanded the humans be quarantined for even suggesting such heresy. Others called for a complete severance of diplomatic relations. High Counselor Vexterra raised her hand for silence. Dr. Zinma, what exactly are the humans proposing? They've developed a method to rapidly evolve organic life forms while maintaining consciousness and identity. They claim they can guide this evolution to create forms immune to the plague. They've already successfully tested it on themselves. The hologram changed to show medical scans of human test subjects. Their DNA structures pulsed with impossible complexity, showing signs of adaptation far beyond natural evolution. Madness, Kull whispered. They've deliberately mutated themselves. Do they understand what they're risking? They understand perfectly, Dr. Zinma replied quietly. They did it because they had no choice. The plague reached Earth 6 months ago. Their simulations show their population has less than 2 years before total infection. This wasn't their first option. It was their last resort. Vexterra studied the scans intently. And the results. The modified humans are completely immune to the plague. More than that, their new biological structures seem capable of adapting to any pathogen they encounter. They're offering to share this technology with us, but they have conditions. Of course they do, Kithel scoffed. What do these presumptuous primitives want? Dr. Zinma's tentacles went completely still, a sign of extreme gravity among his species. They want us to acknowledge them as equals in the Federation. Full membership, full voting rights, and full access to our scientific databases. They also want our help in implementing the modification process for their entire population. They estimate they'll need resources equivalent to building a small fleet to save their species. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Federation had never admitted a species so young, so unproven. The resources they requested could support 12 established colonies. Yet if they truly had found a way to defeat the plague. There's one more thing, Dr. Zinma added. They've given us 48 hours to decide. After that, they say they'll proceed with their plan alone, and they'll remember who stood with them in their hour of need. High Counselor Vexterra's scales shifted to a deep blue of contemplation. Show me everything they sent. Every detail, every simulation, every test result. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. As the data began flowing across the chamber's displays, none of the representatives noticed Dr. Zinma's slight smile. He had spent the most time studying the humans, and he had already reached his own conclusion. Whether the Federation agreed or not, humanity would survive. The only question was whether the Federation would be wise enough to be part of that survival. The human element. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the Federation Council, her modified DNA giving her skin a subtle iridescence under the chamber's lights. She looked nothing like the holographic recordings from 6 months ago. Her transformation was living proof of humanity's desperate gamble. "I understand your concerns," she addressed the assembly, her voice steady despite the hostile stares. "What we're proposing goes against everything you believe about natural evolution. But I ask you to consider this. What is natural about a plague engineered to destroy entire civilizations?" She gestured to the holographic displays showing the plague's progress across the galaxy. 3 species are already extinct because they waited too long, trying to find a natural solution. We refuse to be the 4th. Yes, our solution is radical. Yes, it's dangerous. But we've proven it works. Phil's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. "You've proven nothing except your species' reckless disregard for cosmic order. These modifications, they're an abomination against nature itself." Sarah's modified eyes, now capable of seeing across multiple spectrums, fixed on the Silicon ambassador. "Nature." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nature is change. Nature is adaptation. What's unnatural is thinking we can preserve ourselves in amber and survive. The plague adapts. Therefore, we must adapt faster." She pressed a control, and new images filled the chamber. They showed humans in various stages of transformation, some with enhanced muscular structures, others with modified respiratory systems, still others with completely novel biological architectures. "We didn't just change ourselves randomly," Sarah continued. "Each modification is precisely calculated to counter specific aspects of the plague while maintaining our essential humanity. Our consciousness, our memories, our values, they remain intact. We've simply given ourselves the tools to survive." Dr. Zinma moved his tentacles in a pattern of scientific interest. "The genetic stability readings are remarkable. How did you achieve this level of control?" "By thinking differently," Sarah replied. "Your scientists tried to fight the plague's ability to rewrite DNA. We embraced it. We created a system that lets us direct that rewriting process, using the plague's own mechanisms against it. The modifications aren't just changes, they're evolutionary software updates." High Counselor Vexterra leaned forward. "And what happens when the plague adapts to these modifications?" Sarah smiled, and for a moment, her teeth seemed to shimmer with metallic highlights. "That's the beauty of our solution. We don't just adapt once. We keep adapting. The modifications include a controlled version of the plague's own adaptation mechanisms. When it changes, we change faster. It's an arms race we're designed to win." "You're playing with forces you don't fully understand," Kfol warned. "What happens if these modifications spread beyond your control? You could become a greater threat than the plague itself." "We've thought of that too," Sarah said, her expression hardening. "Each modification is keyed to individual genetic markers. They can't spread accidentally, and they can't be stolen or weaponized. We're not asking you to trust us blindly. We're asking you to verify everything we're claiming. Send your scientists. Study our processes, but do it quickly because time is running out." She brought up a final display, a countdown timer showing less than 30 hours remaining. "We will survive, with or without your help. But ask yourselves this. Do you want humanity as allies, grateful for your aid in our time of need? Or do you want us as potential rivals, remembering how you abandoned us to our fate?" The chamber erupted in heated discussions, but Sarah noticed Dr. Zinma watching her with his primary eyes, while his secondary set studied the genetic displays. She gave him a slight nod. He, at least, seemed to understand what humanity was really offering. It wasn't just a solution to the plague. It was a fundamental shift in how life could adapt to cosmic threats. The Federation had spent millennia trying to preserve stability. Humanity was offering them the tools to embrace change itself as a defense. The question was whether they were ready for such a radical shift in perspective. Sarah checked the countdown timer again and hoped they would choose wisely. Because she hadn't been bluffing. Humanity would survive. The only question was whether the Federation would survive with them. Breaking point. The Federation's scientific vessel, Eternal Truth, hung in orbit above Earth, its sensors trained on the planet below. Inside its primary laboratory, Dr. Zinma and his team worked frantically to verify the human data, while on the surface, millions transformed themselves with each passing hour. "Impossible," muttered his assistant, junior researcher Pell, her crystalline appendages trembling as she reviewed the latest readings. The modifications aren't just changing their bodies, they're rewriting the fundamental rules of their biology. Some of them aren't even using DNA anymore. Dr. Zinma extended a stabilizing tentacle to steady her, and yet they retain their consciousness, their memories, their essential humanity. That's what the Council doesn't understand. The humans aren't losing themselves. They're redefining what it means to be human. The laboratory's displays showed the transformation spreading across Earth's population. Those who had taken the modifications were helping others through the process, creating a cascading effect of evolution. But it wasn't chaos. It was carefully orchestrated, with different groups adopting different modifications to maintain biological diversity. A priority communication from High Counselor Vexterra interrupted their observations. "Dr. Zinma, your preliminary report is disturbing. Are you certain about these readings?" "Absolutely, High Counselor. The humans have achieved something we thought impossible, controlled quantum biology. Their modified forms exist in a state of constant potential, able to adapt to threats in real time. And the risks?" Dr. Zinma's tentacles twisted in the pattern indicating absolute certainty. "The only risk is in not understanding what they're offering us. This isn't just a defense against the plague. It's an entirely new paradigm for life itself." The High Counselor's scales shifted to deep purple, a sign of grave concern. "The Silicon Collective is pushing for immediate quarantine. They're claiming the modifications could be more dangerous than the plague itself." "With respect, High Counselor, they're right. But not in the way they think. This will change everything. The question isn't whether we can stop it, but whether we'll be part of it." On the surface below, Sarah Chen was overseeing one of the largest transformation centers when she received the alert. The Federation fleet was moving into attack position, led by ships from the Silicon Collective. She opened a channel to Dr. Zinma. "They're really going to do it, aren't they? Try to stop us by force. Cathal has convinced enough council members that you're an existential threat. They're preparing to sterilize the surface rather than risk the modifications spreading." Sarah's modified eyes tracked the fleet's movement with perfect clarity. "They don't understand. We're already past the point of no return. The modifications aren't just in our bodies. They're in every cell, every atom of our world. Earth itself is changing." As if in response to her words, the planet's magnetic field began to fluctuate. The modified humans had linked themselves into a vast biological network, and now that network was accessing capabilities that even they hadn't fully anticipated. Dr. Zinma's instruments registered the change first. "By all that's sacred, you're not just changing yourselves. You're changing the fundamental forces around you." Sarah's voice was calm, almost sad. "We tried to tell them. Evolution isn't just about surviving. It's about transcending limitations. If they attack now, they'll force us to demonstrate just how far we've evolved." The Federation fleet moved closer, weapons charging. Humanity's last resort was about to be tested in ways no one had anticipated. The question was no longer whether humanity would survive, but what they would become in the process. Paradigm shift. The first shots from the Federation fleet never reached Earth's atmosphere. They simply ceased to exist, absorbed into a field of quantum probability that surrounded the planet like a shimmering veil. In the council chamber, Kithal's crystalline form vibrated with alarm. What is this? Our weapons are having no effect. High Counselor Vexterra watched the sensor readings with growing awe. They're not blocking our attacks. They're incorporating them, learning from them, evolving in response to them. On the eternal truth, Dr. Zinma's instruments were recording something unprecedented. The modified humans weren't just adapting individually. They had created a collective quantum field, a shared consciousness that could process and respond to threats at the speed of thought. Fascinating, he whispered. They transcended traditional biology entirely. They exist simultaneously as matter, energy, and information. Sarah Chen's voice echoed through every Federation ship and facility, but it wasn't coming through any known communication channel. She was speaking directly into their awareness. Her consciousness expanded beyond normal space-time. We gave you a chance to understand, to be part of this evolution. Instead, you chose fear, but we will not respond with violence. Watch and understand what you're really facing. The quantum field surrounding Earth pulsed once, and every ship in the Federation fleet suddenly found itself transformed. Not destroyed, transformed. Living metal merged with crystalline circuits, creating hybrid vessels that hummed with new possibilities. Thal's own crystalline body resonated with the change. What? What have you done to us? We've shown you a fraction of what's possible, Sarah replied. Your ships, like our bodies, can be more than what they were built to be. Evolution doesn't have to be a blind, brutal process. It can be guided, enhanced, elevated to an art form. Dr. Zinma's tentacles moved in patterns that had no name in his species' language. He was witnessing something entirely new in the galaxy's history. They're offering us a gift we never imagined. Not just survival, but transcendence. High Counselor Vexterra's scales had shifted to a color none of her species had ever displayed before. A luminescent silver that seemed to reflect possibilities rather than light. Stand down the fleet, she ordered. All ships, stand down immediately. The transformed ships hung in space, their crews experiencing reality in ways they had never imagined possible. The silicon beings found themselves able to feel in ways their crystalline forms had never allowed. The organic species discovered their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of their bodies. This is what we were trying to explain. Sarah continued, her voice gentler now. The plague isn't just a threat. It's an opportunity. Life itself is ready to evolve, to become something greater. We humans were just the first to embrace it. Dr. Zinma addressed the council through his ship's quantum-enhanced communications. Don't you see? They could have destroyed us all. Instead, they've shown us that our greatest strengths come not from resistance to change, but from embracing it. Evolution of understanding. The Federation Council chamber had changed. Like everything touched by humanity's transformation, it had evolved beyond its original form. The crystalline walls now pulsed with living light, and the representatives themselves had begun to explore the possibilities of guided evolution. High Counselor Vexterra, her scales now permanently shifting through colors that hadn't existed weeks ago, addressed the assembled species. We stand at a turning point in galactic history. The humans didn't just solve the plague crisis. They've opened a door to a new stage of cosmic evolution. Sarah Chen, her form now a fluid dance of matter and energy, stood in the center of the chamber. The modifications were never meant to be an ending. They were a beginning. Each species will find its own path of evolution, its own way to transcend its original limitations. The Silicon Collective, led by a transformed Cathal, had become some of the strongest advocates for this new paradigm. Their crystalline forms now interfaced seamlessly with organic life, creating syntheses that neither side had imagined possible. We were wrong, Cthul admitted, his form resonating with newfound emotions. We thought preservation was strength. Now we understand that adaptability, controlled conscious evolution, is the true path to survival. Dr. Zinma, his tentacles now capable of manipulating quantum probabilities directly, shared the latest data. The plague itself is becoming irrelevant. As species choose their evolutionary paths, they naturally develop immunity. But more than that, they're discovering potentials we never knew existed. The chamber itself seemed to pulse with the collective consciousness of the assembled beings. Humanity's gift had spread far beyond Earth, with each species adapting it to their own needs and dreams. The galaxy is changing, Sarah concluded, not through conquest or competition, but through conscious choice. We faced extinction and chose transcendence. Now that choice is open to all. High Counselor Vexterra rose, her evolved form casting prismatic patterns of possibility through the chamber. Let it be recorded that on this day, the Galactic Federation became something new. Not just an alliance of species, but an engine of conscious evolution. Humanity has shown us that our greatest strength lies not in remaining what we are, but in choosing what we might become. The chamber resonated with agreement, the quantum field carrying not just their thoughts, but their shared vision of the future. The plague that had threatened to end civilization had instead become the catalyst for its transformation. And somewhere on Earth, in bodies both strange and wonderful, humans looked up at the stars and smiled. They had faced extinction and found transcendence. They had offered that transcendence to the galaxy, not through force, but through example. Now, together with their new allies, they would explore what it truly meant to evolve, not just in body, but in consciousness, in understanding, in the very meaning of existence itself. The last resort had become the first step into a future no one could have imagined, and it was only the beginning. The end.